sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين والبراءة من أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين. اللهم أنطقني بالهدى وألهمني التقوى ووفقني للتي هي أزكى. اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم وافتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. In continuation of the discussion on the life of the commander of the faithful Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, in tonight's lecture, in the next few lectures, I'd like to examine the period of the Khulafa, the three that have preceded the commander of the faithful Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, and how Imam Ali alayhi salam describes this period. It's one thing to read the books of history to see what historians have said regarding this period, but it's another thing to hear it from the mouth of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. No one can describe this period of 25 years like the commander of the faithful alayhi salam. Hence we will go into a quick commentary of a very famous sermon that he alayhi salam delivered towards the end of his life, year 39, in Kufa, in the Rahba. Rahba is either an area south of Kufa, or Rahba literally is the wide area, especially in the mosque or outside the mosque is a wide area. Rahba means something that is wide, massive. But this here in this case is an area that was known as Al-Rahba in Kufa. And when the Imam was there, Ibn Abbas had asked him a question regarding the successorship after Rasulullah and how it was usurped by the Khulafa and so on and so forth. And this is where the commander of the faithful gave a long sermon. And in this sermon he described the situation after the Holy Prophet with respect to the first caliph, the second and the third, and how things ended up with him as a fourth caliph, of course, according to the, as we call it, the apparent khilafah, because the actual khalifa was him, salamullahi alayhi. But because he was eliminated or alienated or deprived of the right to khilafah, he received it later as a fourth caliph when the people came and gave him allegiance after the killing of Uthman. This khutbah is known as al-khutbah al-shaqshaqiyya. And the reason why it's called shaqshaqiyya means the roaring of the camel, is because according to the riwayah, the narration, that while he's delivering the sermon, at one point somebody came and interrupted him. So the commander of the faithful says, إنها شقشقة إنها شقشقة كذا. It's a roaring of a camel that has just calmed down. In other words, he's saying that this interruption was a form of shaqshaqa, or that his speech, he was, very hyped or delivering it in a very high tone, and then he has now calmed down, for example, after he was interrupted. There's different explanations to why he said innaha shaqshaqatun, or this is a shaqshaqa. But in the end, it doesn't matter why it was called shaqshaqiyya. What matters is the content. What is the khutbah al-shaqshaqiyya, and what is the commander of the faithful trying to say in this khutbah? I will inshallah read the English part of it with a little bit of a commentary so that we can have a better understanding of the history and the chain of events according to this sermon, which describes that period between the demise of Rasulullah and between the Khilafah and the government of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Again, the period lasted for 25 years. He says alayhi salam, by Allah, he begins by a qasam, by Allah, the man, now the Arabic says fulan, but in other sermons or in other copies, that same sermon in other books and sources mentions his name, Ibn Abi Quhafa, the son of Abi Quhafa. The son of Abi Quhafa or Abu Quhafa is Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr was his kunya, and his name was Abdullah ibn Uthman. His first name is Abdullah ibn Uthman, and he's from the tribe of Taym, at-Taymi, not Tamimi, Taymi. There's a difference between Taym and Tamim. And Abu Bakr's father had the kunya of Abu Quhafa. So hence, in the Arabic, in some of the sources, he calls him Ibn Abi Quhafa, son of Abi Quhafa. He says that the man, or the son of Abi Quhafa, donned its cloak, knowing that I am the pivot to the grinding stone. He's saying that تَقَمَّصَهَا ibn Abi Quhafa. In other words, Abu Bakr has worn this khilafah and has taken this khilafah that does not belong to him, as if it is a shirt that he had put on. Taqammus in Arabic is if you take someone else's role. Taqammus, when you take someone else's role. You basically, when the person dresses himself in a garment, in a position, in a title that doesn't belong to them. He says, تَقَمَّصَهَا ibn Abi Quhafa. He has worn it like a qamis, like a cloth, like a shirt. وَهُوَ يَعْلَمْ أَنَّ مَحَلِّي مِنْهَا مَحَلَّ الْقَطْبِ مِنَ الرَّحَى. He took this role while he knows that this role only belongs to me. Me in that role of khilafah are like the hand mill, raha, the grinding, hand mill, and the nail. Without that nail that moves the raha, you cannot have any grinding. He says, that is my relationship to khilafah, meaning khilafah cannot be taken away from me. I am the only rightful leader. And then he describes himself. He says, يَنْحَدِرُ عَنِّي السَّيْلُ وَلَا يَرْقَى إِلَيَّ الطَّيْرُ. In reference to his knowledge, in reference to his position and to his high status, he says, يَنْحَدِرُ عَنِّي السَّيْلُ. I'm so high that when there is a sail coming, when there's a flowing of water coming, it is going to be less than me. It's not going to reach me. وَلَا يَرْقَى إِلَيَّ الطَّيْرُ. And birds, as high as they fly, they cannot reach me. Of course, this is metaphoric, referring to what? Referring to his very exalted status. Now, is Ali alayhi salam being proud here, or God forbid he is bragging about his position? No. Ali ibn Abi Talib is the one who does not like to praise himself. He's not in the position to praise himself. He's in the position to explain the status that belongs to him. Because sometimes when you are oppressed and you want to make it clear to the people why you are in this position, you may have to talk a little bit about why you qualify for this position. So here the commander of the faithful is not saying to them, I am here to praise myself. He's ahsantum, exactly, or similar to that, where he's trying to say that I am qualified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this position. I have been given the very high statuses and positions and ranks such that no one is close to these positions and these qualifications. No one. لا يرقى إلي الطير. Birds can fly as high as they want to, but they won't reach my status. لا يرقى إلي الطير ولا ينحدر عني السيل. And then he says, I draped a curtain across it and turned my face away. فسدلت دونها ثوبا وطويت عنها كشحا. He says that this khilafah, when I saw the circumstances after Rasulullah, after Ibn Abi Quhafa took it, I placed a curtain. That's an Arabic expression that says that I just left it. سَدَلْتُ دُونَهَا ثَوْبًا. when you put a curtain over something, as in you just left it. وَطَوَيْتُ عَنْهَا كَشْحًا. Kashh is when a person turns their face and they just abandon something, they ignore something. Why did you do that, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen? Why did you abandon the Khilafah? Why did you ignore the Khilafah when it was taken from you? Why didn't you take it back from them? He then explains and he says, I weighed two options. I thought about it and I had two options. The first option is to strike with an amputated hand, is to go and fight, but I'm going to fight with a hand that is amputated, a hand that's cut off. A hand that's cut off indicates what? Lack of support. If somebody's hand is cut off, can they fight with that hand? No. He says, my first option is to fight with an amputated hand. That was my first option. What's my second option? And he says, or endure a blind darkness that renders the grown-ups infirm and the children old. He's saying, or I have to observe patience and endure patience such that it would extend for a time that the adults become older and older and they become of old age, and the children become adults. In other words, it's not going to be a day or two. I will be patient for a generation or two, 25 years. He says, I had these two options. Either I fight with an amputated hand with no supporters, which is going to lead to nothing. I'll be killed in the end. Or I observe patience. He says, Salamullahi alayhi, and then he says, I saw that patience was the thoughtful choice. When I weighed my two options, I saw that patience is my better option. And this is a lesson for us. Sometimes we may take an option that is not easy to swallow, an option that is difficult, painful, but it's the less of the two evils. Because if I were to go with the first option, which is to fight with no supporters, the natural result is I'll be killed. And Islam needed me at that moment. If I were to be killed, who's going to take care of Islam? Hassan and Hussein, you might say, will take care of Islam. They were children, number one, and they would also be killed by extension. The person who has the audacity to kill the commander of the faithful will kill both Hassan and Hussein. And we saw in Karbala what they have done. They killed the infants. They don't care. They will kill everyone. So therefore, the commander of the faithful says, look, the interest of Islam requires that I remain alive. Although I'm not in position of power and authority, at least I can try to amend things and fix them and guide them, even from behind the scenes, without me being on the position of, or in the position of Khilafah or leadership. He says, I saw that patience was the thoughtful choice. So I endured. But was this patience and was this enduring an easy thing to do for me? Or was it painful and challenging? He said, صَبَرْتُ وَفِي الْعَيْنِ قَذَى وَفِي الْقَلْبِ وَفِي الْحَلْقِ شَجَى. Qadha is the things that when they're thrown in your eyes you can no longer see. They're painful, like sand that's thrown in your eyes, dust that is thrown in your eyes, or even certain, for example, hairs are stuck in somebody's eye, or certain types of wood or small wood that is stuck in the eye that creates a lot of pain. He says, I endured while having that pain in my eye and having the shaja in my halq. Shaja and the halq is like saying something that is choking you, like a very, very sharp stick, or let's use the example of a fish bone. Imagine a fish bone stuck in the throat, how painful that is. So he says, I endured something that is painful. It wasn't easy to endure, as if my eyes were always hurting me and my throat is choking. That is the pain I had to undergo for 25 years. And then he says, Salamullahi alayhi, I saw my inheritance looted. Turathi. Turath, they say he's referring to either Khilafah as Turath, because in the end it's an irth from the Holy Prophet by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or he's referring to the land of Fadak, which was usurped from Fatima. And yes, it belongs to Fatima, but eventually belongs to Ali ibn Abi Talib as well, because they are one. And here he says, Ara turathi nahba, I see that my inheritance has been looted. And he says that it was until the first went away, tossing it to another after him. He says after Abu Bakr died, he gave it to someone after him. He appointed someone. But here the Imam is going to make a comment. He says, how strange that he should wish to give it up during his life, yet secure it for another after his death. He says, Abu Bakr, you're very strange. You're very odd. Because when you were living, you said, Aqiluni 3 times. Aqiluni means, or allow me to withdraw from this Khilafah. I was in regret being a Khalifa. I am not fit for this. He said, Aqiluni, give me the permission to leave. Relieve me from this pledge, this bay'ah of yours. But of course, Umar ibn al-Khattab convinced him otherwise. He says, no, you have to continue. So he says, when Abu Bakr says, Aqiluni, that means he's not qualified to be the leader. How can he appoint someone to be the leader? When you yourself don't feel that you have authority, then how can you appoint someone else to be your successor? He says, how strange that he should wish to give it up during his lifetime, yet secure it for another after his death. It is very odd and ironic when they say that Rasulullah left without appointing anybody, but Abu Bakr was very keen on making sure the Muslimin have a leader after him. So he appointed Umar. So where was this thought from Rasulullah? Why wasn't he thoughtful of this? And then he said something. He says, the two divided the milk from its udders between them. The two, Abu Bakr and Umar, they had plotted to make benefit of this Khilafah, as if there is something they're milking. It's like milking a cow. They both took share in milking this Khilafah. In other words, they had worldly interest in power, and they both had interest to support one another because they wanted to each receive their share. And then he says, this next one held it to a stony field. He says, let me tell you about how Umar held it. Umar was known for his very rigid personality, his very violent personality. So he says, the next, meaning the second, Thani, the next one held it to a stony field where any who ventured sustained deep wounds and experienced rough passage. Anyone who dealt with him, anyone who opposed him, would have to deal with a level of rigidness, a level of unkindness, a level of violence. And he was known for that. And then he says, how often did people stumble in this terrain, and how often did they make excuses for stumbling? How many times did Umar make mistakes in his qada, in his judgments? How many times he was left baffled and left bewildered about a certain rule, to the extent that he would rush to Amir al-Mu'mineen for help? How many times he made the statement by saying that everyone is more knowledgeable than you, O Umar. Even the women in their homes are more knowledgeable than you. Why? Because he was put in many awkward positions where he would not know how to answer a question. He would not know how to resolve an issue. This is Umar ibn al-Khattab. And then he says, he is like one who rode a resisting camel. He says, in Umar's Khilafah, if the analogy that Imam uses is a person who's riding a difficult camel, a camel that doesn't want you to ride it. He says, if you pull the string that is holding the mouth of the camel, think of the string that you pull on the camel as your steering wheel in the car. That's how you manage the camel when you're riding it. He says because this camel is hard to drive, hard to ride, it's a sa'ba, it's a naqa, that it's a she camel that doesn't want you to drive it, so it's going to be in resistance. He says if you were to pull it, it would do what? It would tear the nose of the camel if you pull it hard. But if you let it go or let it loose, it will drop you. It will throw you off the camel. So both ways, you're not going to win with that camel. So he says the approach of Umar ibn al-Khattab was a very rigid approach, either extreme right or extreme left. He didn't have a middle solution. And hence he says that his situation is like that person who's riding a she camel that does not want him to be riding it. This shows us that Umar ibn al-Khattab, in the 10 years that he ruled, because Abu Bakr ruled for about 2 years and a few months, Umar ruled for about 10 years. In these 10 years, a lot of mistakes happened. A lot of problems happened. He would make so many wrong decisions in his khilafah. They say that one day he heard music coming from one person's home. So what he did is he wanted to know what is going on. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. So he jumped over the wall of the house. And he looked at a man and a woman. They were sitting and they were listening to music and whatnot. He said, "How dare you do this, committing sins like that?" They say to him, we admit that we've committed a sin, but you committed 3. He says, how? He says, Allah says, وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا, and you were spying. You came, you heard, and you're not supposed to spy at people what they're doing in their homes. We're sitting in our home and you came spying. 2, Allah says, وَادْخُلُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ أَبْوَابِهَا, enter the homes through its doors, and you came through the wall like a thief. That's 2. And 3, the third one is coming in a way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ادعو إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة, something along the lines of this verse. Yet you came attacking us. So they said that he left them. He says, yeah, you're right. You have a point. Then he left. Mistakes like that many times happened in the life of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Let alone the times where he was about to issue death penalties to people who were not worthy of death penalties. Like that woman that came to him. She came to him and said that I have given birth to a child after 6 months. And the person, her husband, came with her and he says she's an adulteress. How can you give birth to a child after 6 months? Therefore, kill her, stone her. Umar says, okay, you gave birth after 6 months, definitely. And your husband says, before the 6 months you were not with him. So definitely you were an adulteress. And therefore, let's kill you. Ali ibn Abi Talib heard about this and he came and he says, no, hold on. This is wrong what you're doing. He says, why? He says, because the pregnancy can be 6 months. It's not impossible. Quran says that pregnancy, the minimum pregnancy is 6 months. He says, how? He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَفِصَالُهُ فِي عَامَيْنِ, that the nursing goes up to 2 years. وَحَمْلُهُ, in another verse, وَحَمْلُهُ وَفِصَالُهُ 30 شَهْرًا. And he says the combination between nursing and pregnancy is 30. 30 minus 24 is 6. So therefore, 6 is the minimum time and duration of pregnancy. So this woman is innocent. You cannot stone her just because she gave birth after 6 months into the marriage to this man. And Imam alayhi salam saved the life of that woman. Many instances in the time of Umar that would happen similar to that instance. Many times where he would issue wrong verdicts, wrong rulings. In fact, he would even change certain rules. When you go for Hajj, you do Umrah. And after that Umrah, you take a break. And then you do your Hajj rituals. We call that Umrah al-Tamattu', the Umrah of pleasure. Why is it called the Umrah of pleasure? Because after the Umrah, you have a break to enjoy the pleasures that were not lawful for you during Ihram. You take that break. And then after the break, you do another Ihram for Hajj. Umar says, no, we don't need that Umrah Tamattu'. So he connected Umrah to Hajj, no break, made life difficult for people. And he says, I ban this Umrah. And then he bans a marriage that was sanctioned by Allah and His Messenger, Zawaj al-Munqata, the temporary marriage. He bans it. And then he says that, 3 divorces in one sit count as 3 divorces, not one. And he says we need to remove Hayya ala khair al-amal. And he says we need to add as-salah khairu min al-nawm, because somebody woke him up one day. He was sleeping. Khalifatul Muslimin sleeping. He wasn't awake during Fajr. So someone came and woke him up. He says, wake up, ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. They give him the title Amir al-Mu'mineen. As-salah khayrun min al-nawm. Salah is better than sleeping. So he woke up and he says, this is a very good thing to add, so that people can now wake up in the morning. So after you do your adhan, what do you say? As-salah khayrun min al-nawm. Salah is better than going to sleep. And it became part of the adhan of Fajr. As-salah khayrun min al-nawm. In many instances, he would introduce things to Islam that are not permissible, or he would go the opposite of what Rasulullah had established. Rasulullah saw people in the nights of the month of Ramadan offering their salah in congregation. They were doing it together. And he says, don't do that. Either you do it in your house, or you just do it in individual form, because you cannot pray nawafil in jama'ah. Years later, when Umar was a Khalifa, he entered the masjid and he saw people praying Taraweeh separately. The nawafil of the month of Ramadan. Everyone is doing it on their own. He says, why you guys do this? Come together under one imam. Let's do wahda, let's do unity. All of you come and just recite behind one imam and do this in jama'ah. And then he says, this is a bid'ah, but it's a good bid'ah. This is a good innovation, because we're trying to bring people together to do this. Well, Rasulullah should have known this was good. He's the one that banned it. So you see these additions and these tamperings and distorting that Umar ibn al-Khattab was doing during his reign, that Ali alayhi salam had to deal with and endure. And most of the times Ali alayhi salam could not fix these things and could not change them, because the authority was with Umar. So the Al-Khutbah Al-Shakhshaqiyya, in that sermon, the Commander of the Faithful describes the era of each of these. So he discusses Abu Bakr in brief, and then he discusses Umar ibn al-Khattab in brief, and then tomorrow inshallah we will continue. He'll go right into the reign of Uthman ibn Affan, and he'll talk a little bit more about Uthman ibn Affan, and then he would go beyond that to talk about how he became the 4th Caliph. Wa alaykum salam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Inshallah, we have time for questions. Sisters, on your end, nothing? Okay. Brothers, if you have a question on your end. Sure.
So the Quran said, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa Muhammadun ila Rasulun qad khalat min qablihi rusul afa in mata wa qutila inqalabtum ala aqabikum. This verses came like during the Prophet Muhammad time, right? So the question is, like, why the Prophet Muhammad did not really emphasize this? Hey, when I die, everybody going to go the wrong way. So, the question is, why did not emphasize on this one, or did he emphasize?
He did. No, he did. So in multiple occasions, for example, in Bukhari, he reports that Rasulullah says, كَأَنِّي بِأَصْحَابِي عَلَى الْحَوْضِ. He says, as if I am near the pond of Kawthar, and my companions, I say, why are they not coming towards the pond? Because somebody, the Malaika are taking them to the hellfire. And I say, Ya Allah, these are my companions. The response comes, you don't know what they have done after you. So he gave them heads up that you guys there's going to be betrayal. And he mentioned multiple times to the Muslimin that أوصيكم بأهل بيتي خيرا أني مخلف فيكم الثقلين. Hold on to the Quran, hold on to the Ahlul Bayt. Do not violate them. لا تسبقونهم أو لا تتقدموا عليهم. Do not go before them. So he did give a lot of these points and prophecies of what will happen. But unfortunately, when people want to do something wrong, they will do it regardless.
But the majority of Muslims, they follow the first and second, third.
Very good question. How come the majority followed the first, knowing that he's not the Khalifa? The same question we raise is, how come Banu Israel, 95% or even more, after they saw all the miracles, as soon as Musa went to the miqat, 30 days later he was late by 10 days. In those 10 days, as Samari fooled them, they all left Harun except a few, and they worshipped the calf. Now, how did this happen after Rasulullah, where they left Imam alayhi salam? Because usually people don't want resistance. People don't want to go out of their way and fight. So what happened is, when Imam Ali told them, aren't I the Khalifa of Rasulullah? Some of them said, yeah, but we can't do anything now. It's too late. We don't want to fight. We don't want trouble with the new leadership. Especially when the new leadership begins by threats, begins by showing people the red eye. People want peace. They say, I don't want to deal with this. It's okay. We'll succumb to it. And we saw an example in Kufa. These people that gave allegiance to Muslim ibn Aqil, and they gave allegiance to Imam Hussein, they were excited and waiting for the coming of Imam Hussein. And they gave allegiance to Muslim, and thousands prayed behind Muslim. But as soon as they realized there is danger, what did they do? They all left. So it's unfortunately a human nature, where not many people stay firm.
The first and second Khalifas, they have really like a big influence.
They have influence. That's a good question. How do they get the power? Before Rasulullah's demise, Abu Bakr had, when Rasulullah died, Abu Bakr was not there, by the way. He had to travel outside of Medina. Either they said he had another wife or something, but he had to go outside of Medina. And there's a fishy movement that was taking place. Rasulullah said, I want you to go to Jaysh Usama and go with Usama. And they insisted on not going. So one of the theories says, one of the scenarios, is that he went to coordinate with Banu Aslam. Banu Aslam were from the A'rab outside of Medina who were known for their nifaq. So he went and gathered as many of the munafiqeen. Because when you're going to take power, you need support. You can't be by yourself. So the problem is, they went to many tribes from the hypocrites and the munafiqeen and took allegiance and support from them. By the time he came to Medina, when they came to attack the house of Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam, there were hundreds of people with him. Where did these people come from? These are the munafiqeen that he gathered. The rest of the Muslims stood, not with him, but they stood watching. The Muslims that were there, the Sahaba, they didn't necessarily support him in this, but they stood watching. And that's why when Fatima Zahra gave her sermon, she reprimanded them. Says, how dare you see that the daughter of Rasulullah being oppressed and her right being taken, yet you're doing nothing about it. And this is where Ali ibn Abi Talib said, let me go out of my way to put to make it clear, and to, as we say, ألقي الحجة عليهم. He went and he took Sayyidah Fatima, Hassan, Hussein, and he went to them house after house in the night, saying, I need your support. And they would say, it's too late, sorry, we can't do anything now. It has become a reality. And then he says to them, all I need is 40 men to come tomorrow, muhalliqeen, shave their heads, and ready to fight with me. I will regain my khilafah. The second day, 3 came. And then the fourth, which was Ammar ibn Yasir, came a little bit later. Imagine. 4 people. Now we know, other than the 4, there are really good people that didn't come. Really good people. Why they didn't come? When fear overtakes a person, even the good people sometimes end up failing the test. So it was definitely a huge dilemma for Ali ibn Abi Talib, dealing with that kind of reality. Ahsantum. Assalamu alaikum. Go ahead, Hajj Hamid.
Regarding this Bani Aslam, I heard that there's a narration from Umar. He says, when we saw them come in, then I knew the victory was ours. So they had that big tribe come in.
Ahsant, Umar, yes,
Oh, yeah,
yes.
Umar.
Yeah, so you can see there's coordination. It wasn't in vain.
Yeah.
And those who study with a detective mindset, when they study the history with a detective, because it's once to read the history without a detective mindset. You read it like, as we say, a very basic read, superficial read. You just skim through. That doesn't give you much. But when you think, you ask questions. Why was Umar and Abu Bakr insisting not to go with Osama? There was a very strong insistence. And why did Abu Bakr all of a sudden leave when Rasulullah was sick the last days? He had something to take care of. He could wait. If you care about Rasulullah so much and you don't want to go with Osama, then stay with him. Why did he leave? And why did Umar, when he heard people saying Mata Rasulullah, he threw a tantrum and he put a big scene. What did he start doing? He said, no, Muhammad did not die. If I hear someone says he died, I will cut their head off. Why? The way they explain it is he was emotional. He couldn't believe that Muhammad died. No, that's not the reason. He did not want the Muslims to hear the news until they have secured everything. So there's a lot of things that were going on. It wasn't like, why was Rasulullah they were trying to, some people were trying to assassinate him coming back from Ghadir. There's a muhawla of ightiyal. Why? All of this, when you put it together, the puzzle, you come to realize that there was a movement in Medina, a movement of nifaq that aimed to overtake or overthrow the government of Islam in Medina, even during the time of Rasulullah. But because they failed during the time of Rasulullah, when he went to Tabuk, remember last time we talked about Tabuk, that plan was supposed to be done even when Rasulullah was alive. That when he went to Tabuk, he was supposed to be killed in Tabuk, and Ali ibn Abi Talib killed in Medina, and then the Munafiqeen will take over. But their plans failed. So now their only opportunity is what? Rasulullah is dead. Rasulullah is dead, we have a good opportunity. We won't let Ali take it. We will figure something out and take it from Ali ibn Abi Talib. So there's a mu'amara, a conspiracy that truly was planned in a very, very delicate way. Yes, Haj Hamid.
Regarding the khutbah itself, the Shaqshaqiyya, is it true that that's one of the most eloquent khutbahs or speeches? Because even I heard when I was in college, some Sunni brothers would read it, like you were saying, reading without, skimming through it, but they were just in awe of the eloquence. Is that true?
That is true. The eloquence of the khutbah Shaqshaqiyya, they say that the phrases that were chosen in it are very top eloquence that no one, even at the level of Al-Sharif al-Radi, who was very known for his eloquence and balagha, he could not compose something close to that. Because they tried to accuse